Hey y'all, how's it going today? I hope that everything is coming through just fine. Yeah, it's gonna be a chill stream. We're not gonna do a whole lot. I still have Christmas mugs out, so just bear with me. We're gonna be working in some Astro. We're gonna be doing some Sanity work at the same time. It's a headless CMS. But I guess I should kind of walk you through what I'm getting into today. I'm still kind of setting up the stream setup over here too as well. No big deal. Um, Minimize these things. That didn't help. All right. Anyway, let's go over to screen share mode. So this is a site that I put together for my father for Christmas this past year. Something that I had thought about for a few different years in a row. But for one reason or another, I couldn't quite make it happen. And so, what this is in the grand scheme of things is actually um, my dad's untapped history, which is a social beer tasting app. Um, so here he is with all of his check-ins and all the cool stuff. He enjoys tasting beers and rating them and all that. He enjoys that quite a bit. One of the things that I was frustrated about all of this was it's really hard to figure out what he'd tasted. So we'll bring him a group of beers for Christmas each year from Michigan. He's living down where I used to live in Memphis, and coming in here and trying to find things that he already had tasted was a huge pain. So I wanted it to be a little bit easier for myself, for my wife when we were picking out things to bring down. But also, I knew that he was frustrated by it. He'd actually created a Google spreadsheet to deal with a lot of that. So a couple years ago, I thought to myself, "Hey, I bet they have an API." I knew they had an API because some friends of mine had used it like 8, 10 years ago, like when it first came out. And when I went to see about using it, they had closed access to it. They had said, due to bad actors, we can no longer offer this. It's only available on business accounts, blah, blah, blah. So that was really frustrating. I kind of gave up on it 2 years ago. And then a year ago, I thought about it and thought about maybe just setting it up in a way in like Airtable or something like that. And then gave up on that idea pretty fast. And then this past year, in December, I started working on it, wrote a whole bunch of scraping code because that was a whole, I kind of planned a video on this a little bit, but it was a whole adventure. You can see here, I've got my VS Code. Here are all the various scripts I had to write to run either in Node or in Google DevTools, Chrome DevTools, to get what I needed. And then I asked him, hey, do you ever see the need to edit these things? And he, of course, said yes, being a former news editor. And so instead of putting it in, at the time, I was thinking about putting it in Zata, decent serverless database. Instead, I tossed it into Sanity so that he could edit it in Sanity Studio, which was its own fun adventure, but it wasn't too bad. So all this now exists as data inside of his Sanity Studio, where he can edit things. You can see here's a whole bunch. Here's all the venues, the check-ins, the breweries, and the beers that he has tried. And they're all connected. They're all like queryable in between, and we're gonna look at some functionality there, fixing it up today. But the end of it, right, is that one of the things I want to be able to do is kind of give him more insight into what he likes. If you have all this data, if you have all this this quantified information, you should be able to query. You should be able to kind of figure out various things in the way that that works. And it's something that, like, for all the data that exists inside of Untapped, you can't do a lot of these things. You can't kind of introspect on what you want to get. And so, like, this is kind of the dashboard that I kind of threw together at the last minute, probably Christmas Eve. I put most of this together where I could actually run queries, and I found like the average bitterness of his beer, of his top 10 beers, the average alcohol by volume of his top 10 beers what his top ranked beer was, what his top ranked breweries were by both count and by average rating. So obviously he's had more from this company, which is local to the Memphis area, but apparently Kona Brewing Hawaii is his top ranked brewery. And then the beer styles by rating, the beer styles by count. And then here's a nice little sortable table, and then each of this has all of the beers on it. You can click through to each of the breweries. The breweries then have a beer list as well. I also want to kind of show off like what states he's tasted from and be able to kind of figure that out. And all of this also needed to be able to have the individual check-ins that happen. So all of this data starts in Untapped. And then I have a scraper that can run again manually. Currently, I'm planning on maybe setting that up to run weekly or monthly or something like that. He doesn't update that often. To then pull the data over into Sanity and then do all the scraping that has to happen there. It's a huge pain, if I'm being honest, the way that all this works. And it's primarily because Untapped is not running on modern frameworks, right? It's still using jQuery, which, hey, I love jQuery. It's good stuff. But a lot of the way that the actual HTML is set up is counterintuitive to a lot of things. Some of the naming conventions are really bad. So it was an adventure. It took me about a month of a little bit of work here and there to get this up and running. But one of the things that we're going to work on today is that, like, honestly, this is kind of haphazardly put together, right? And so what I need to do is I need to add a couple features that he's requested for me. The main thing is, the first thing that he asked was, on the main page, can we add the tasting location in terms of place? So the actual place that he sampled the beer is also something that's in there. Think of Untapped as like old school Foursquare, but for beer. So this one should be relatively easy. This one I'm not concerned about at all. So let's take a look on the main page. We're going to add a tasting location. That's just to the table that we have on the beer list. So here. So right now what we have is the brewery, the style, the city and the state of the brewery, as well as some data about the beer. And then we have the first taste, which connects up to the check-in for that first taste. You can see here, it's right here on this one. And then the average rating. And right now it's sorted by average rating. I can also sort it by, first taste and stuff like that. So what we need to do is we need to get the data for the check-in on this, which obviously we're already getting some of it. So that's why I'm saying it should be relatively easy. So I've got this set up as an Astro site because it's the technology that I currently enjoy the most working with. But also the nice thing is it's got really everything that I need. I can write serverless scripts. I can write this SSR. Right now, all of it is actually pure static generation, because static, in my opinion, is what a site like this should be. So what we can do is we can take a look at our home page. I'm gonna have to remember partially how all this is set up. So we have our pages, we have our check-ins, but what we want is the index.astro file. So then let's see here. I'm gonna minimize a whole bunch of these things that are the top area. Let's see, total beers, don't need that open. I don't think I need any of this open. So we have a beer table component. One of the things we might also work on today is cleaning up the code, because some of the code is written late at night at my parents' house while we were there for Christmas. And I'm sure absolutely could be written better. So I want to clean up as I go if I can. So the first work that we're going to do is on the beer table, which this is the start of cleanup. I decided to make a component, and then I decided I didn't need that because it wasn't exactly the same on every page, but maybe it should be the same on every page. We'll see. All right, so what we need is a new table column in all of this, but we need the data for it. So we have first taste coming in our beers that are being passed in. Our beers are coming from the index page, where I'm doing a weight get collection, which means that we're using Astro's 5.0 content layer API, which means that the data collection happens at build time, which also means we're going to be restarting the server here in a second, in the content.config.ts. And I'm doing actually a whole lot of heavy lifting in this file. We have the beers by state because the beers are actually their own thing. I'm having to run some queries there. Let's minimize that. We've got all the check-ins being defined. We've got the breweries being defined here as well. And you can see I've got queries out to Sanity in that. And then we have the beer. So what we're actually doing here is, this is Sanity's query language. It's called GROQ, Graph Relational Object Query Language, I think is what it is. And it's honestly, like my favorite way of querying. You can actually, they have a JavaScript version of this too. There's an actual JS package, NPM package that you can get that allows you just to run this against any large JSON array that you want. But what we're doing right now is we're getting all the documents of type beer and then grabbing all this information from it. We're doing a destructure here to get the brewery information that we need. We're also getting the check-in by doing it this way. And I might refactor this a little bit here. Why am I getting check-in with just the ID? I don't want to keep making queries because that's going to make this a little bit slower. So I think what I want to do here is get the check-in information for each of these. Let's actually move this over to the Vision plugin inside of Studio here. So let's run that. So instead of this idea of check-in just being the ID, which I'm using the ID to then form the link to the check-in, what I probably want to do is get more data. So let's get rid of a lot of this so we can see better. I always like to write my queries inside of whatever I can do here because it's a much better REPL than doing it inside of my code editor. Although I think Sanity nowadays offers some things around that. All right, so we have our ID, which you can see we're actually using the references method. So it's grabbing the ID from the beer that we're inside of, and then it's checking for types of check-in on that ID. So instead of destructuring this and just getting the ID, let's see what we get for all the data. And this is one of those things that I actually enjoy more than GraphQL, is that instead of having to always specify, if I choose to, I can very easily remove the object destructure that I've got there, and it gives me all the data. So you can see here on our check-in data, we've got the date, which is what we're getting. We've got the untapped link. We've got the beer, but we don't have our venue. Why don't we have our venue? I thought for sure I would have. This is where like the data side of things, if we don't do the data properly, we can't get information properly. All right, so let's take a look at our check-ins. Our check-ins have untapped URL, location URL. It has a venue, but some of them are unpopulated, but some of them are populated. Okay, that's perfectly fine. That's a data inconsistency. Okay, so some of them don't have venue, and that's probably to do with some bad scraping that happened earlier, but many do. So that's fine. That means that we've got the data, just not on the one that we saw here. Let's scroll down a little bit. Check-in. Why is the check-in inside of an array itself? I feel like it shouldn't be inside of an array. So I guess I'm doing a query, so yeah, it is. That makes sense. Am I actually worrying about that in my code? Interesting. Interesting. Let's go to the beer table. And again, this is where like you do things and you don't do them properly, and you hit some walls. New date, first taste. That's the first taste. I'm not doing anything with that check-in except for making the anchor tag. Yeah, see, I'm doing a 0 on that. There's probably a better way of doing that. Yeah, I'll think about that. But what we want here, we definitely still need the ID, and I want this to be a small object coming back. So let's find our venue. Oh, venue's right here. Cool. And of course, we're going to have to do the same thing here where we're what do they call it? Projecting. So we want to get the venue and destructure that. This should work. Venue is null. That's all fine. Some of these don't even have check-ins, apparently. All right. Venue then has 12 properties. And on this, we can also get only what we want. So I know that for this query, I need the city and I need the name. And then I don't currently have venues in the system. And we're going to do a dynamic route later on to bring that data in as well. And all the data exists. I just need to format it for Astro. So the venue for the homepage, we know that we're going to need, I'm going to grab the ID off it because when we make the pages, I'll need that. To make anchors, we know we want the name and we know we want the city and probably the state, even though that wasn't a request. But that's probably what we want. All right, let's check to make sure we're getting what we want here. ID, name, city, and state. Perfect. All right, so our check-in is now going to still be that array, which let's go ahead and get that taken care of right now too. Let's get the 0th here, I think will work. Check-in is now a direct object. All right. And I think that's what we want. I think that's probably the best way of handling this right now. Yeah. All right. So let me grab this check-in. We're going to replace that in the way that we're building our content in our content config, which closed. Awesome. Let's keep some of these open. VS Code, content config. So check-in, instead of just getting the ID, is going to get all of this now indented there. It's going to get the 0th, which means that we're going to have a break that we're going to have to fix in the anchors. So let's check that out as well. So we come in here, broken. See, because check-in.length is no longer a thing. But now what I can do is I can check instead of against check-in.length, I can just say check-in end and go from there. Which honestly I should probably be doing for that entire string. Anyway, let's take a look and see what we got going on there. And actually, I know that we're going to want to restart the server anyway, because that's going to fetch all the data in the new format. All right, so here we're saying basically if there's a length, which we don't care about anymore, we literally just want to check against check-in. So if there is a check-in, then display the anchor. You don't like that? Cannot read property ID, because that's a 0 as well. All right, no big deal. Check-in ID. That should work now. Yep. Now, the next thing is I got to think about, do I want to sort by this? And I'm not 100% sure. Hey, Richard. Welcome. Or Rick. It's cool that you're learning Astro. How far along in your learning are you? Because there's some simple stuff we're doing today, and then maybe we'll do some complex stuff too. Let me know. All right, so we have the data that we need. So now we just need to modify this, this table to display it. So let's dump all of that into a new table data here. In fact, like, here's what I'm wondering. Do I want to sort by this? I know I want to sort by check-in date. So it might be that I've just got a check-in information, this like tasted at, and I just put all that string together in there. And then see what he says, right? See what my customer wants there. My customer, of course, being my father. P2 border. I do not want this to be my score. Thank you, Copilot. What we want here is a few things, right? We want those things we just got. So let's get the check-in venue name. Let's just start with that. Erroring. Why don't you? Because I have to check to see if there is a venue, right? So this will be let's just say check in and end. Is that what we want? No, we need this to be what are we doing here? And then we put that in parentheses so that we can get this as data, and then like that. Still not liking that because, all right, no big deal. All right, check in, end, end. And then we want to say, let's just put like p tag. Make sure we're doing this right first. All right, there they are in all their glory, all the hellos. And then here, we want this to be check-in.venue.name, and we need to nullish coalesce here to see if there's a venue, because not all of them have venues. There we go. That was the main issue, right? Because some of these don't have venues, so those pieces of data don't exist on that object anymore. So now we have these, which is great. With not my rating, which of course the table doesn't know, because this is a table, because this is actually tabular data. So we need a new table header here. We can call it venue. That's probably fine. All right. Now I'm curious as to why it's breaking my first taste sort. It's a good question. I don't really know what's happening there. All right. Well, for the moment, we're okay. Let's refresh. But yeah, that's broken. Why did that break that part of it? Let's see if there's any issues in console. No issues in the console. Let's make this a little bigger over here. All right, so why would this no longer sort? Did I break the ID? Data sort, TBR, sorting by, this was an interesting thing. So I'm using a JavaScript library called sortable.js, which is not like in the way you'd consider modern stuff, right? It's not actually data driven. It's actually DOM driven, which I like. And I was also looking for something super easy to implement. And all the like React tables and all like the super like nice data sortable table libraries were super complex. Like I was going to have to completely learn those. Anyway, so why is this table column no longer sorting? Probably because first taste is wrong now, because again, we changed the way that that worked. But no, first taste always worked that way. It does sort when it sorts. It sorts properly, and again, there's some data inconsistencies here. We got to go back in, and we got to add some of this in. The scraper missed a few things, but it's not sorting by default, which it's supposed to be. When I put first sort, I think, oh, is that how I was doing it? Sortable, sticky, description. Yep, that must have been how I was doing it. Why did I turn that off? Why did I uncomment that? There it is. It's working properly now. Okay. No clue why that was commented out like that. I'm sure that won't bite us in the future. All right, so that's there. And that is legitimately the feature request, right? The feature request was add the tasting location. He also would like the city to show. So I might do that. We might put that in parentheses, right? Because again, I don't like the more table columns we add, the worse like his experience becomes. And I don't know that we want to sort on this view by that data. All the other things I think are decent. And actually, looking at this real fast because I know that Rick was in the audience shortly ago. This is actually a fun thing for Astro, right? I know you're learning Astro right now. So you can use client islands, right? You can use the whole islands architecture, and you can like bring in React or whatever you want. But the cool thing is when you just want to write JavaScript, you can write it in your template when it's only supposed to be there, right? And you can use all of the nice things that we think about in modern ECMAScript, right? In modern JavaScript, without having to like have a separate file or anything like that. So I mean, what we're doing here, we've got an import statement literally in an embedded script. I think that's really cool. It's all based on the way that the actual compiler works, which is way above my pay grade. I'm not entirely sure on how all that works. So what I get to do is instead of like making sortable.min.js a file that I've got, right, that I store in my assets that I then link to in a script tag, I can just say import and it's going to bundle all of that up for me. Super cool, super handy. And then I just write vanilla JavaScript real fast, which this on its own was all I needed to make sortable.js work. But then what I'm basically doing, and this is straight from their documentation, right, is I find the element that is my table and the thing that I want to sort by, and I literally click on it in the JavaScript element.click to make it the default load. Again, there are better, more traditional, or not more traditional, because this is like super traditional, but like more data-driven table libraries out there. But this was easy and met most of my needs. All right, so that we fixed that. So now we can come in and we can add in the venue name we already have and the venue city. So maybe put in parentheses here, check-in dot venue dot city. And I need to put that in some curly braces, don't I? All right. So there we have it. And the fun thing, right, is actually the idea of home in Untapped is just like a generic thing, right? So it's not home in Memphis. That's not a thing that was listed. I actually wrote that as I was ingesting these things, as I was scraping the data. I know where my father lives. So I was able to put that in there on the fly and store that data for my use later. Rick's coming. I did JS and cloud engineering bootcamp last year, and I've bought Coding in Public. Yeah, Chris, his Astro course. I haven't seen that Astro course, but he's an amazing educator. I'm actually thinking about writing an Astro course with my friend James Quick too. We've talked about it in December. The best time to start a new project is right before the holiday, right? Which I need to get back with him, and we need to start planning that out a little bit more. But I think Astro is as close to my personal ideal of how I want to write code in this current ecosystem as it gets. I like writing static first. I like the option of bringing in the occasional server-side thing. In fact, one of my favorite things, and you can go find it on my YouTube channel. I did a video on it. Is this Blue Sky widget that I've put on my homepage. You can see we're actually looking at the one that I just sent out on Blue Sky earlier today. This is a server island, which is kind of like a client island, but different. And what it does is it actually renders this on the server and then makes a client request to get the HTML for this area on load. And it makes for some really interesting, like little islands of interactivity. But in this case, I'm not doing that full fetch and all of the HTML and all the DOM rendering in the client. I'm making a fetch, and Astro is putting together my template and my HTML on the server in the function and sending that back down. And that was a really cool thing. There's a video on the YouTube channel about how to do that. You can see actually there's a, let's see, there's an article on my site about it, but it's literally just the YouTube video because I haven't had a chance to write that up yet. But yeah, so I think Astro is really, really cool. I like all the interconnectivity of it, and I think it works really well. And it's honestly, I don't mind Next.js, but Next.js really wants it to be server rendered, and Astro kind of wants it to be server rendered. So I'm happier with that. I'm actually working potentially on a presentation that is basically like it's okay to write static. It's okay to go for HTML. Um, anyway, all right. So we've got that. We should probably bundle that up and go ahead and push that. If I'm being honest, because that's a complete feature at that point. I probably should have named this something other than just updates. That's real good. So yeah, so let's get status. All right. Yeah, I also on this same one again. This is great tiny commits, right? I also upgraded Astro to 5.1. So let's just add it all. We'll be fine. Git add, git commit. The message of upgrades, Astro and adds venue information to homepage. Git merge updates. Git push. Yeah, I agree. Like a big front end framework is 100% overkill for many things. And in all honesty, right? Astro is pushing it, right? Astro is trying to go maybe a little bit too far, in that they're also kind of wanting you to be server rendered again, kind of, not fully. And they really, they kind of push you into wanting to do, your React kind of framework and stuff like that. But it is not the same. But it is not as like low key as my other favorite framework, which is 11D, which is like hardcore HTML first. It is absolutely incredibly HTML first, meaning that honestly, we don't even know how many 11D sites are out there because it doesn't generate any code that you don't write. So there's no real way. They encourage you to write a meta tag that is the generator, but you don't have to. So like, whereas in Astro, we can find some of the packages that get rendered by it, and Next we definitely can. 11D you can't because it's literally just what you write. So there's levels. Let's see, you got a question. Would you be playing with client router in this session? I will not be playing with client router in this session, because this is all I'm doing this all static. This is all HTML at this point, this being rendered, because it's also all relatively small pages. So the HTML that's being rendered is super quick coming from my CDN. I could do things with maybe like some client transitions and stuff like that, which would be neat, but unnecessary. And neat but unnecessary is not what I'm going for. Rick saying his current website is 11D. My website was 11D up until November, I think, maybe October. Actually, I apologize to Zach Leatherman. I got to hang out with him a little bit at Web Unleashed in Toronto, and I was like, I'm rewriting my site, Zach. I'm sorry. I actually wrote a book on 11D. That's how much I like it. I wrote a book for Pact Publishing on 11D by example, which has 5 different projects that you create in the process. I like it a lot. I like 11D, but when I want to bring some interactivity, Astro is easier. So I also want to kind of like, when I'm a content creator, like I am, like I got to make sure that I know the things that are also going to bring in audience, and Astro is one of those. But Astro is one of those that I actually enjoy. Right? We could be doing this stream on Next.js. Right? We could be making this stream, and I could be talking about Next.js in all these same ways potentially. But I don't like Next.js as much as I like Astro. So I find the things that people like and that I like, and work towards that. Cool. So we pushed that. That should be going live soon. Let's make a better branch for this next one. What else do we need to do? What else did I say that I would do here? Be great if everything tied together. Oh, so we also want the ability to have a link to the venue where this is only first taste too. He has a few things that he's logged that aren't the first taste, but we want to make sure that we have a venue link, and we don't currently have that right now. So this will be a good opportunity. We can talk about Astro's content collections and all that, because we need now a page that I can link these to, right? Fall City Brewing Company, Grind Burger Kitchen. This is actually for my birthday. We went to Louisville and all hung out as a family. It was my 40th birthday. My amazing wife set that up. But you can see we hung out. There was actually a little pizza place across the street that we could go to, which was fun. Anyway, so we want to be able to link to these and then provide the same thing like what we do for the breweries on a page like that. So that means we need a new dynamic route, and to get the new dynamic route, we also need a venue list. So what we can do is first make a new Git branch, right? Git checkout, new branch, venue page. All right, then in our content config, let's minimize that. We need a new collection. So we're going to define a new collection. You can see we've got one for beers, we've got one for breweries, beers by state, and check-ins. So we also want venues. So const venues equals define collection. And since there's some people in the audience now, if you ever have any questions about any of this, I'm going to assume maybe you know some of these things. But if you want me to go into more detail, ping me over in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it over there about like, hey, I've never used the content collection API, which is the new way of bringing everything together in Astro. But let me know if you have questions. And I'm going to take a look at this real fast because I got to remember how I've done it. So we define collection. The arguments are an object that can have a loader. The loader is where we're going to make our request to get information, and we return an array of each of these in a specific format. So because I don't like to rewrite, let's grab all of this and we're going to modify it. So we're going to go into our define collection, and we're going to paste the brewery code that we've written. And the big thing that we're going to change here is the query and what we're passing back out. So in this case, we don't want this to be breweries. We want this to be venues. We're going to do a venue search. In fact, let's grab this and let us put that in Vision in the studio. And some of these things won't exist, but some might. Let's see if that errors. It doesn't error. Cool. So some things we'll have to figure out is reworking the beer count, the average rating, and the beers list, but that shouldn't be a big deal. And that will be in Grok, the query language for Sanity. But we are automatically getting the city state. So I did format my data in a way that makes sense. So that's excellent. But let's see, when would you use a collection and when would you use an Astro action with a fetch? Okay, that's an interesting question. Since I'm building this statically, right, and I want all this to be at build time, the proper way of doing this in Astro, especially Astro 5.0 and beyond, this became something in 5.0. Let's switch to heads up. In 5.0 and beyond is the idea of the content collections. Now, in the past, what the collections were a way of getting markdown, right? It was actually, you'd actually just corrected this in a YouTube short too, because I have my most popular YouTube short of all time is how to get markdown files as data in Astro, which was to use astro.glob, which was the proper way 2 years ago to do this. But then they refactored that for Astro 5.0. It's now the content collection or the content layer API. And the great thing is you can do the glob, right? You can actually get all the markdown if you want, but I have no markdown. The cool thing is now I can do this. I can define a collection where I can fetch data from an exterior source. And what that's going to allow for is all of my data API to be the same. It's going to make consistency better. It's going to make speed better. The way I would have done this before isn't with an action. What I would have done is in my dynamic route, I would have written a fetch in that, it would have pulled this data in and then I would have used it. So now instead, Astro is actually going to run all of this kind of at the beginning, and all that's available. So I don't have to worry about, I make a query here, I make a query there. They're almost identical, but I'm making that query twice. This is all making it once at the beginning, making it all available for what I need in the future. So it's a nice clean API. You can also write custom loaders. I wrote one while I was working at HighGraph for loading HighGraph content. I think it was really interesting. So yeah, I wouldn't use an action. Actions are really, really great for when you need to trigger a serverless function from your front end, right? So forms are a great example. They actually have a special way of doing forms, but really anything that you're doing that then you want to query a serverless function that you've got and have a nice consistent API for it, that's what actions are for. I don't have any content right now on actions, but it's actually something that I'm working on right now because actions are one of the new cool things in 5.0. And I've used it a little bit and it's a really cool piece of functionality. I need to create something around it. Question from Rick, is Vision a Netlify thing? It is not a Netlify thing. Vision is a plugin in Sanity. So here's my Sanity Studio, right? The headless CMS that I'm using. And it's basically an API playground inside of the studio. It's not default in Sanity, although I think it's default when you run it locally. But you can add it on. And so this is functionality built into the Sanity Studio for making it easier to play with your data and figure out what you need. Just think of it as an API playground inside the studio. All right, let's see. Actually, we don't want that to be there. Let's go here, take a look at this. Let's find one of these lower ones. All right, so we're getting a 0 beer count, which is a problem because obviously the venues don't have beers. That's right. The venues have check-ins and the check-ins have beers. Great. That's super awesome. So yeah, we can definitely do this, but it's going to be an interesting query. And it's actually going to show, some of the power of Grok. I mean, all of this, in my opinion, shows the power of Grok, right? So instead of venue, let's go back to brewery, right? I'm actually, brewery, is that right? Yeah. I'm contemplating some content around Grok because I think it's excellent. But like the thing that's happening here, like we can get the data as it stands, right? This is the brewery, we can get the city, we can get the state, whatever it is. But we can also do little functions so that we don't have to worry about it on our front end or on our build, right? We don't have to do any additional work. We can do the work inside of Grok. So if I want to get a beer count, a number of the beers from a brewery, right? What I can do is I can run the count function against this query, and this will give me the count of beers from this brewery. But I can also get the rating, and I can run the round function off of the math average function inside of Grok, and I can take all the scores from each of the beers, and this one took me a little while to figure out. This one was a complex one. And that spits out the average score for a brewery. So in this case, the average rating is 2.25, which is based on the individual beer ratings as well. So each beer has a rating, and those then get averaged into an overall average. And again, I could have done that in my JavaScript. I could have done that in my build. I could have done that in my front end, whatever it needs to be. However, this server is probably more powerful than my build server in Netlify. It's probably more powerful than the client that's being used on the front end, right? So if I can offload that stuff to this query and then get it all back, I think it's way better. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do, as well as like destructuring and getting, beer lists for the brewery. But we need the venue with the information. And we're probably going to start just by getting this information so we can build out the dynamic route. Start simple and kind of move on. We've got the ID. I'm going to use the IDs instead of like a slug. I didn't write a slug for any of these. It would have been cleaner if I'd done that, but I don't actually care about SEO on this. It's just a small personal project for my dad. So I don't have to worry about human readable URLs or anything like that I would worry about on a real project. And I would encourage you, especially if you're just starting out, like, yes, learning best practices, and yes, learning SEO and all these things that are really important on the web. Like, learn those things. But when you're working the first time on some of these technologies, like, figure out and use it in personal projects and use it. One of the things that I'm really interested in right now is the idea of the power of the developer. And the power of the developer is something that's often talked about with influencers. Let's go into soapbox mode again. The power of the developer is often talked about in influencer mode as like, hey, here are like the 5 projects that you can write to get you hired by a FANG company, or to get you, your first, $5,000 client, or get you whatever, all kind of monetarily based. But the cool thing is we can use our knowledge of being a developer to be powerful for ourselves too. So one of the things that I've also kind of written and thought about is, like, let's just look up like Astro content layer, right? What you might expect to see nowadays when you do a Google search is you might expect to see at the top Google AI summary. But I don't particularly want that. I just don't. It's wrong sometimes and it gets in the way. And I don't want to encourage that behavior from companies, if I'm being honest. And so what I've done is I've actually written a rule in this Chrome plugin called User JavaScript and CSS that on google.com finds this data attribute and display none. It just won't show the AI summaries. Just kills it. It's gone. So I never have to see that in my browser. I have to see it on my phone and anywhere else that I go. But in my browser, in my desktop browser, nope. So we can do things like that, right? Or one of the things I've also written in that plugin is a rule for every website, and I'm looking for certain classes that I don't ever want to see on the internet. Oh, you're not seeing what I'm seeing because I'm in sandbox mode. Right, so like, here's the interface for literally every website. If it is Outbrain, which is a really bad news ad system that shows really inane content and hopes to get you to click, display none. Does it have this ad class? Does it have Taboola, which is the same as Outbrain, just a different company? Display none. Kill it. This is also something that you see on like recipe websites, and you see it on like Gizmodo is a site that has it. I don't want to see that. It pops over the content. So just axe it. Anyway, so the power of the developer, right? You can do all these things. You can make your experience on the web better, but you can also make tools for yourself and for your friends and family that make their lives a little bit better as well. So sometimes it's not about writing, the best SEO friendly code or the best thing that's going to make $1 million. It's sometimes just about writing the thing that makes the most sense for you. And in this case, the easy thing is not to have a slug, because I would have had to scrape it in a specific way to have done that. It would have made my scraper much, much worse, because I have to think about this, like rock endo. I don't want to slugify that. Anyway, so I'm just going to base it all off the ID. So this is actually the query that I'm going to start with for our venues. So venues are going to be this grok query. And then instead of mapping over our breweries, we map over our venues, and we have a venue passed in. We grab the ID off of that, and that's going to be the ID in our content layer API. And then we spread all of the venue information into the object that is the data object that Astro is going to give us in our pages. Save that, open this back up, restart the server, because when you're running the content collection API layer, oh, I broke it. Let's see. Uh-oh. Why isn't it like the API? Interesting. Beer list, no modules. Node request is erroring, and that's from my Sanity API. I wonder, will this work? I don't think this will work. No, that exists. That's there. That's funny. That's literally on Sanity, so that's real interesting. So that exists. I wonder if there was just a momentary blip. Yeah, huh. Sanity must have had a blip there for a second. My API was literally down for a second. Interesting. So then we map over. Why is venues Okay, and then after I'm done with that, and I'm gonna have to restart the server again, then I export my collections at the bottom. So I've got my beers, breweries, beers by state, put space there, check-ins and venues, and restart the server. No, yeah, the API keys are all in there. They're in my .env file. And again, all this was working. Like I have the client, which is the best way of doing it, right? I'm importing my client from this file here, and that's using an environment variable that I already have saved. And it's the same client being used in each of these, right? So if one was working, they all should be working. And again, I think it was a blip in the API. But it's there now. We're good. And let's see, venues is being used now. That's good. There's a type issue here. I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. So yeah, so now we can make a new dynamic route. So let's make a new, let's close out components, layouts, in pages. We're going to make a new file that lives at, I want this to be venues slash id dot astro. And you can see that kind of follows the naming convention I've got here. I've got slug for states. Did I do that for all of them? Let's see. Yeah. Let's keep consistent. Even though technically it's not a slug, I called it slug in the first one, so let's keep our code consistent along the way. And again, let's get some of the information that we don't want to have to copy and paste. Oh, that's a good opportunity for cleanup. Don't need this anymore. You can see at first I actually wasn't using the the collections API. So this is actually the old way of doing it that I mentioned before, right? So in my dynamic route, I would run const brewery. I'd do that fetch. I'd get the data, and then I'd use the data. So I was doing that literally on all my pages. This just kind of collects it all in a nice file over to the side. So while I'm here, let's delete that because we don't need that anymore. All right. So let's just grab this entire thing. Oh, and let's clean this up here too because we don't need that Sanity client anymore. All right. Save that. Come on down to our venues. All right. So let's see what we're doing here. We're going to get collection, which we do want to do. We're going to name this venues instead. The collection that we called it is called venues. And again, we're just basically finding and replacing all this stuff with what we actually want. And I'll explain this here in a second since I know that we've got some newer folks in here. All right. So a few things that I'm doing here. And then we pass the const astro props venue. And then we got to do a find and replace on all those breweries too, huh? All right, brewery dot becomes venue dot. All right, cool. Are we erroring? No errors, good. All right, so what we're doing is we're awaiting the get collection method first, right? We're saying, get me the venues from our collection API. So that's going and it's finding the data that we ran and that we got at the beginning of our build. And then I'm saying, and this is kind of the way you would do any dynamic route inside. In fact, you can see up here, let's indent some things. Let's have cleaner code, shall we? We're actually running export async function, and that's the get static path. This is how we're building out the HTML for each of these. This is kind of basic Astro functionality. It's reminiscent of the way that Next used to work. But again, Next really wants you to write it server side. Oh, you see a brewery? Where are you seeing brewery? Let's see. Oh, yep. Good call. Thank you. Good catch, Rick. Thank you. Venue. So a few things that are happening here, right? So I'm running that, and then the paths are where we're going to go, and we're going to say, all right, from our parameters, we had this slug idea, right? This is a named parameter in our dynamic route called slug, and I want the slug to match the venue.id. And again, this is not the ID technically as it comes out of Sanity. It's the ID as it comes and is formatted by the collection API. All the other data is in venue.data. So one of the cleanup things I do here, because I could run and say venue.data in all the things below and just pass as a prop the entire venue object. But I don't want to do that. There might be good reasons to do that in some cases. In this case, I want cleaner code down below. And again, I could probably destructure it down. But my props that I'm passing into any page that gets created in this process, I'm calling something venue, and I'm putting the venue.data in the venue. And then at the bottom here, this is what's going to happen on every built page. I'm saying destructure the venue object off of astro.props. So if we had other props, we could add them up here as well. In this case, we just have the venue. And then I'm passing all that information into my template, and I'm getting a whole bunch of information. Now, some of this information doesn't exist yet, and we're going to have to figure a lot of that out. So let's comment out this table. And let's see what we can get on our individual venues, which we're going to link from the beer table. So we have a venue, or check-in.venue.city, and I'm going to wrap all of this in an anchor tag. In fact, I don't actually need this as a paragraph. So anchor href equals, in this case, we want to be, we want to be a string that is slash venues, I think, plural. Yeah, venues slash, and in this case, we want to be the check-in dot venue dot ID. And again, probably just for safety, let's make sure we've got all that. And then we end it with an end anchor and save it. Make sure there's no errors. I think we're okay. Localhost. All right. So now each of these, all right, that has a page, it has data. So go here, Fall City Brewing Company, Louisville, Kentucky. In fact, one of the things we also have in all of this is, let's go to the venues. We have a full address too, if I wanted to. I could build a map if I wanted to. It'd be great. So let's see. Oh, I have a slug. I should be using a slug on this. I actually did something right. Look at that. Yeah, let's change that out. I'd rather that be a slug. All right, so content config. We need to also get the slug off of these. And honestly, do I want the IDs for this to be the slug? Because it could go either way. Let's see what happens over here. Not venues. Ooh, more code. Oh, no, that's not more code. I can delete. So we got param slug. So instead, if we said venue.data.slug, we're trying to match off of that. Was matched, but no matching static path was found. Let's restart. So then this no longer exists, as it should. So now if we come to this, it's still trying to load that. Let's refresh the home page. All right, Fall City Brewing. Still trying to, because I haven't changed the beer table. So instead of the ID, this now needs to be the slug, which we're not getting in the beers. All right, hold on. We can fix that too. You make one little change, and then you got to change everything. I should know better than this. All right, so our venue now also needs a slug to come in. And again, like sometimes it's also why just getting all the data is nice. But we want to keep our fetches small. I totally understand that. All right, so now we should have a slug. And the slug should be here. Save that. And let's see. Hover over. We have that as a slug. Hey, and we have a nice human readable URL now. Great. Let's see. Hey, Alan. Welcome to the stream. What is a slug? Why is it ever called a slug and not a path parameter? That's a great question. In fairness, actually, this is due in part, I believe. I'm going to look this up because I think it's an important thing that we can look up. But it's in part due to my old profession, I believe. I believe this dates back to newspapers and to a lot of like journalistic stuff. So let's look this up real fast. Why is it called a slug? You can see there it tried to show us an AI generated result there, but no, I've got a plugin that stops that. I wrote. All right, let's see. Here we go. Closed issue on Stack Overflow. Let's see. Yep, here we go. Here's an answer. The term slug comes from the world of newspaper production. It's an informal name given to a story during the production process. As the story winds its path from beat reporter through editor, through the printing process, is the name that's referenced by. Some system. Another old thing that I love, such as Django. One of my first big frameworks that I used the slug as part of the URL, and it dates back even further. We had slug lines. So yeah, it is from newspapers. It's from the way that a story would go through the entire process, dating back before they were even using computers for a lot of it as well. Let's see. On line type machine, a slug was a single line piece of metal which is created from the individual letter forms, making a single slug for the whole line. So that was, again, kind of dating back even further. We had that kind of idea. And then although pure conjecture, an early meaning of slug was for a counterfeit coin, so maybe that was kind of the idea of the printing term coming from that potentially. So all really interesting. I don't know exactly, but that, like, I knew when I was in newspapers that before we even moved to Django and some of the other systems for our online sections, we were using the term slug for articles in the layout systems that we used. So for the actual print layout. And so, yeah, it is from newsprint. Good question. And I love origins of terms. So, yeah. As for Newman saying the way they reference the story, yeah, it was the way that the story would get referenced. And in fact, it would often be in like a dash delimited way. So like, Brian dash Robinson dash story would be the slug that would find its way through the system, because the reporter, the editor, the layout person, and the printer all needed to have a unique identifier for it. So again, it was a unique identifier back then. It's a unique identifier now. And that's why it's called that. Yeah. I like how Newman's like, and now back to coding. No. Like, I have a degree in philosophy. Let's go down the origins of words. Let's do that. Yeah, let's get back to coding. Especially since I probably should stop in about 10 minutes or so, because I'm starting to get hungry for lunch. All right, so where we need to get to? We have pages generating. Now we need to figure out getting the beer list. So let's write some interesting grok. Let's figure this out. So looking at our data, we have no beers and we have no check-ins on the venue. However, each check-in has a venue, which means we can do a reverse lookup on that. So let's get all the check-ins for our venue, right? So we can get check-ins, and that's going to equal, Lo's here. Hey, Lo, I miss you. So yeah, you slug for the layout positions in Yearbook Club. Absolutely. All right, so for grok on this, we're going to find all documents in the system that have a type of check-in, and then we also need to grab only the ones that also have also reference the ID from our venue. So that would be the current document dot ID. That should get us, I need ends. Undefined function. How do I do that function again? Grok functions. Let's see. We want the reference. It's references. I always make it singular, and it is plural. It's not actually plural. It is that this is referencing, so it's references. All right. So now we have all the check-ins, which we can see here. Check-ins have a 0. Let's see. Check-ins, multiple check-ins on our second element here. All right, so we had the check-ins. Each check-in has a beer associated with it, so we need to raise that up. So what we actually want is, as we're going through each of these, we want it to only show, and we're actually going to, I think we can destructure this further, but we'll get to that in a second. So for each check-in, we want to grab the beer, and we want to grab some information off of it. What information do we need? We need like all of it. We need a whole bunch of it. So let's just look at that real fast. So now for each check-in, we are getting the beer information. including all the things we need for our table. So I want to hoist that. And I think, though I'm not quite sure, that I can do this. So then what we're getting is a beer object on each of the check-ins, which is not what we want. We want to take that another layer up. So now I have to do this on the fly and think this through. But you can see, like in the data, we're getting what we want, but we're getting it one layer deeper. So on each of my check-ins, I'm now getting a full list of all the beers, I believe. No, it's 13 properties on the beer. So we're not even getting what we want yet. All right. And again, I can do this in my build. And I might just do that so that we can get where we want to be for today and come back and fix it in the future. But I like doing as much in Grok as I can. So the check-ins now have an array. The arrays are of each check-in. All right, I've done this in another bit of code. Let me find that. Yeah, Rick, I would actually, there's a cool little website called grok.dev. Because Grok, again, can be used outside the context of Sanity. Obviously, it is the most powerful in the context of Sanity because they have other built-in functionality that do it, but it is also, I believe, roughly feature complete with the npm module that you can run against any JSON array. So this is a website. It has a whole bunch of information. You can take this array of JavaScript over here, you can play with it over here and go here. It even has, if you like Pokemon, here is the first 151 Pokemon, and it actually runs some things where it says total number of faster Pokemon compared to the current Pokemon being run through. So Grok is real cool. And Lo in chat right now, Lo and I used to work together at Sanity. We crossed paths for 3 years there, or for 3 months there, and then we worked together at HighGraph for a bit as well, about 1.5 years at HighGraph. So, but yeah, like the biggest thing that I've missed since leaving the Sanity ecosystem for a little bit, this is it. This is the big thing that I missed. It's super powerful. A lot of cool things you can do. More things now that you can do than even when I used to work at Sanity. So a lot of cool things there. I really want to hoist this. I really want to make this work. So let's see. Venues is where we're currently at. Breweries, I feel like I was doing all of my Grok queries are in my content config. So let's look here. All right. First taste, that's not what it is. So I don't think it's going to be in my beers. I think it's going to be in my breweries. But again, I'm not hoisting that. I'm hoisting things here. Yeah, it's this, I think. I think that destructures it. And then we do the dot. That's I think what we need. All right. So we have our check-ins. And so we want to, on each of the arrays that get generated, we want to grab the beer and send it there. Is that right? All right, so our first check-ins is, so here we have, so instead of check-ins, this will no longer be called check-ins. This will be our list of beers. And so now we have in Bristol, Tennessee at the Southern Craft Barbecue Bristol, there was 1 beer tried. And then at the Deadwood, South Dakota, Gem Steakhouse and Saloon, we have 2 beers tried. So we now have that at the top level. This is what I want for it. So let's bring this over into our content config for our venue. So now, let's clean this up a little bit. Yoink. Now, in theory, oops, errors. That's a problem, but I don't know if it's a problem we need to worry about right now. Let's go to our venues, and then we should now have this information as well. Let's see. So we have venue.beers.map, which is, I think, what we called everything. And we get a name, a style, and a score. I think that's right. And there they are. There they are. And again, like all that stuff that I did, I could have written here, right? I could have said, give me the venue dot check-ins dot map, right? And I could have gotten the beers from that. I could have, or actually I would have done a reducer on that, right? I would have done a reducer to loop through it and build a new array out of all of that. Or maybe I wouldn't have done a reducer. I probably would have done a map. Anyway, I don't need to do it. I don't need to worry about how I would have done that in my build because it's all coming through the data. And again, like Grok is highly optimized in, I think Sanity is using Postgres in their way of fetching that data. So I'm getting a very, very highly optimized query out of it that honestly is probably faster than even doing that JavaScript map in the way it's happening. So I do as much as I can in there. In fact, I spent an entire day of this project figuring out that, I think that brewery one, I think it took me a long while to figure out getting this average rating maybe, where I'm basically saying, like, find all the beers, grab the score off the beer, then destructure the array out of that. So it's just a list of the scores, and then get the score off, get my score off of it, then average all those together and then round it to the second decimal. All of that, again, I could have done in JavaScript. Do you say that you can just use that against JSON without Sanity? Yes. And I don't know how up to date it is. But let's see, Grok, JS, NPM. So what Sanity likes to do in general, a lot of smart people there. I absolutely adore a lot of the development team there. They love making specifications. Like, the team there is perhaps a little specification heavy, but it allows them to do some really great work. So Grok isn't just how they do queries, right? Grok is a specification for how you can take JSON and make it basically easily queryable in this way. And so they also have a package that you can grab called Grok, and you can run it against any JSON. So you could build your own parser too, right? Like if you had a database or that you were running, you could then make Grok available on it, just like people have made GraphQL available on many databases. The reason that it hasn't happened is, I would say, capitalism, right? Like, if you are competing against Sanity, why would you use Sanity stuff? But it's pretty nice. You can use against any JSON. In fact, I used it a little bit. Let's go into my terrible folder of scraping scripts. I used it in here somewhere, just against, like, I've got these. I scraped these first, and I created a file around it, and then I used that. Because I kept trying to run everything at the same time, and it would error in various ways. You can see I also have a breweries.json file. And so what I would do is I would run Grok against this to check for things. So I was using Grok for my local JSON and for checking against the server, which was kind of a nice combination of things. There's a lot of code in this scraper work directory that I am not proud of, but it worked. Which is also the fun thing about doing that. Because in fact, let me share this quick anecdote, right? When I was writing this, I thought it'd be super easy. I thought I would get Puppeteer, which I'd used Puppeteer before to do all sorts of different things. And if you look here, there's recent activity. There's currently no way of getting, they have an RSS feed for each user, but the RSS feed is only the most recent 25 check-ins. So if you want to get all the data, you have to figure something out. And so I have this, right, which is, in fact, I can go somewhere else too. There's various ways you can get it, right? But down here, this isn't actually how it used to be. They've changed this just in the past month and a half. So down here, there would be actually, no, they haven't changed it. When you're signed in, there's a load more button. When you're not signed in, you have to sign in to get the load more button. And so I didn't realize that at first because I was logged in when I was doing the initial like research for how I wanted to do it. And so I wrote a Puppeteer script that would go click the load more button just over and over again until it was done. So I could have a page that had all the check-ins. What I didn't know was that it hid that from you if you weren't signed in. So I kept having my script return nothing. And I was very confused about that for a while until I realized that was happening. And then I researched how do I get Puppeteer to be able to sign in. It was a whole thing. I needed other packages installed to be able to do it. So I said, I'm signed in the browser. I'm no longer signed in, but I was. Let me click that button myself manually over and over and over again. And let me open up my console and let me write, let's see if it's still in my history here. In fact, let's see. Up. You can see there's a lot of rating stuff in here. Here we go. Let beers equal a blank array. Go through, I actually had something called the beer array, which was for each of these, right? Grab each of these, put it together into that, push it into the object, and it would spit back out an array of all the data, and I would copy that over into my file. So I had to do all of that because honestly, it was going to be a bigger pain to do it with Puppeteer. In fact, there is no Puppeteer in my process anymore because I wanted to run it in a Netlify serverless function, but as it turns out, you can't. There are workarounds, but overall it's too big of a package. You can't run it. You can't run headless Chrome easily in Netlify serverless functions. So now what we're doing, because I know it works, is I'm doing a fetch request to the page. So when a check-in happens, I get a list of the check-ins and I pass that to this function. Then this function goes and it runs a fetch request and it gets the string of the HTML for those pages. And then there's a great package called Cheerio.js. Let's see, Cheerio.js, which takes a string of HTML, not a DOM, a string of HTML, and pretends like it's the DOM and gives you jQuery-like functionality. So instead of using all the new cool good JavaScript, document.query selector all, blah, 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 you use $, dot, and you're able to find all these things, or $ parentheses, and you pass a selector in and you get all the stuff off of it. So Cheerio is really a cool little library for parsing an HTML string and doing all the things that you need to off of it. So now my scraper, which runs for just a small amount of stuff when new things are added, runs off of a standard fetch, standard node fetch, and Cheerio. So really cool. I like it. All right, let's see. So we have all this. Then we also need to interlink this, right? So I need, let's close that. I think I've got all the beer information, which means I can go to my venues and I can wrap my anchor around this equals, we'll want this to be string interpolated. This will be /beers/ I think it's going to be beer dot, it'll be venue. Oh, nope, I'm in the wrong spot completely. This is the table header. We want down here, wrap the beer name, which actually it's beer here, so that'll be good. This will be beer.id. And then we close our anchor. We wrap the anchor around the beer.name, save that. And you can't see it because, again, I'm using Tailwind, and of course Tailwind strips all the styles. I need to figure out some better stuff here. That goes here, but apparently it's not the right identifier. So that raises the question, how am I, I don't actually have beers. Beers aren't actually a thing that I have pages for. Which I totally could have, and I probably will have. But we don't have that right now. So let's undo that. Save that. And this is, again, another fine save point, right? Like I can go here. This is partially what's asked for. So I've made an hour and 20 minutes with some good conversations on the side. I've gotten to the point where we have on the main page tasting location for each of the beers. So good on that, check. If everything were tied together, the only link is for brewery. If I clicked Metalsome, the page would show what the venue had, and where I had each beer. So he also wants that on the brewery page. So that's easy, I think. We'll want to do the same thing with our breweries on the beer. Oh, that's actually, I'll have to write another big grok script for that. So we're not going to do that today because that'll take me probably another 5 to 10 minutes. And then the main page had the city and location in the city. So Flying Saucer would show all the beers I've had there. So that's there. So let's commit this. Git status. See what we got. Some new pages and some other stuff. Git add everything. Git commit working venue pages and links. Git checkout main. And again, like you should be doing pull requests. I should be doing pull requests. Git merge venue page. But I'm YOLO. This is me. And then we get push that. And that'll go to the main site and the next feature set is out. So yeah, let's see. I have a question. You say blah, blah, blah. Scraping. Yeah, scraping is. Alan says scraping is always a messy business. Absolutely true. Scraping is awful, but it can work and it can do some really cool stuff. Anyway, that's all I'm going to do today, I believe. Let's go back to heads up here. So thanks for hanging out with me, Rick and Lo and Alan and Vidar. Like, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It was a really fun stream. Maybe we'll do this again later in the week or next week. And I've got more feature requests here, and I do really need to clean this up. Like, this is some awful code in many of the places here. So we might do some refactoring as well. Thanks for hanging out, and see y'all around.